Good evening, friends, and welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon. You know the drill. I'm a retired New York City police detective, and if you like all things true crime related from that police detective's perspective, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing and liking this video, sharing it out onto your social media platform. So this way you'll get all notifications when Ed Wallace and I go live or upload another video. Hey, tonight I have a treat for you. I have retired district attorney and criminal defense attorney Pete Krusco. He is a fan favorite of Crime Time with DutyRon, a former district attorney in Queens County and now practicing law in his own practice. And he took out the time to come out and join us to explain Charlotte Sena's abductor's charges. You know, a lot of folks have questions about the kidnapping charges. Will there be upgraded charges? And I know that everybody here is invested in this thing. We're so elated and happy that Charlotte was reunited with her family, because after 24 hours, we know 90% of these abductions go wrong. They go bad, and we don't have a good result. But in this case, God was good, and it was a miracle. Charlotte was brought home into her family's arms on Monday. And when we all got to notice that happened, we were all just shocked. So thank you to each and every one of you who are joining, who are sharing and giving this video a thumbs up. I'm going to play a little piece of media for you, and I'm going to add Pete on. It's just 2 minutes. We're going to play this. It's going to describe what we're going to be talking about here tonight.
We have new information on the suspect charged with kidnapping a 9-year-old girl in upstate New York.
We're learning more about the fingerprint on a ransom note that police say helped them find her alive and make the arrest. And tonight, police are working to see if Craig Ross is linked to any other crimes. CBS 2's Tony Aiello spent the day in upstate in Saratoga County, and he joins us now live. Tony.
Maurice, a family member told me Charlotte Sena spent the day quietly with her mom and her dad. Can you imagine that family's relief to have Charlotte safely back home? It's a sense of relief widely shared in this community.
I've been praying for 48 hours since I got the first Amber Alert.
Carol Brown lives just down the road from the location where police found Charlotte Sena hidden in a trailer behind the suspect's mother's home. Brown knew something was up Monday night as her quiet neighborhood exploded with activity.
Then the entire road lit up right here with police officers, with a helicopter overhead, just like out of a movie.
This drama had a happy ending. Charlotte, shaken but in good physical condition. Suspect Craig N. Ross, age 46, grabbed by members of a local SWAT team. He's charged with kidnapping Charlotte from Moreau Lake State Park as she biked on Saturday. The governor says Ross set the stage for his own arrest by visiting the girl's home, putting a ransom note in the family mailbox early Monday morning.
Leaving a critical piece of evidence behind, his own fingerprint.
A check of the print led cops to the suspect within hours. Witnesses say the assembled first responders erupted with applause when Charlotte was found in good condition. As for Ross,
My family had an issue with him in the beginning of the summer.
Carol Brown says she came outside one day as her young grandson was in the yard.
And standing over him, right over him with his back to me, was that man. And my heart sank.
You confronted him, he got on his bike and he rode away.
Yes.
We've all seen this report. This is, again, a neighbor that lives close by, and this guy was hovering over her grandson. Just goes to show you the mentality and the creepiness of this guy. And if you look at this picture, he's a winner. This is his booking photo. And we heard from his son. His son made a statement to the Post and to others and said, I don't care if he rots in hell. And that says it all for me. When this guy's own son says, I hope he never gets out of jail. I hope he rots in hell. So we will find out more about this creep, Craig Nelson Ross Jr., 46 years old, born on St. Patty's Day in '77. The only thing that I feel horrible about is that he shares a birthday with my father. So this scumbag Again, this is a face of evil right here. His son is a grown man, Ray. His son looked like he was in at least his 20s, or late teens, early 20s. I'll show you a picture of him in a few minutes, but I just want to let this rest of this play and then bring on Pete.
And I believe with all my heart after last night that probably my grandson was this close.
So the suspect gave the court a different address in Porter Corners, New York. We checked. That address in Porter Corners is literally just around the corner from where the Sena family lives. And that raises all kinds of questions about whether Charlotte was known to the suspect and whether he targeted her. That address in Porter Corners was searched today along with other locations. This is still a very active investigation. The suspect remanded to jail without bail. Live in Saratoga County, New York, Tony Aiello.
So there's a local fellow, Tony Aiello. Without further ado, I want to bring on our guest. Again, he's a retired Queens district attorney. He prosecuted on federal, local, and I believe state level. And Pete will correct me. He always corrects me when he comes on, but I love this man because he takes the time out of his busy schedule. He's a practicing criminal defense attorney to join us and give us an education on the law side. Pete, thank you so much for joining. How are you this evening?
Hey, DutyRon, how are you?
Hey, always good to see you. Yeah, always good to see you, Pete. I wanted to go right away and put you right on the hot seat. Your credentials are tremendous, and you've prosecuted many, many bad people like this in your time, I'm sure. I wanted to get your thoughts on Craig Nelson Ross Jr. This case, again, is not the normal type of case, Pete. We don't usually see this happy ending when a child 9 years old is abducted and held for 2 days. Just wanted to get your thoughts on this case right out of the gate.
Well, this is a great result, and it's rare. I go back to the 80s and 90s when the drug gangs were kidnapping competitors, and you would not find the kidnapped victim, and sometimes you'd find them in parts, in bags left on the road or thrown into the bay. So this is a great result. It could have been much worse. The police did a wonderful job and a quick job, and I commend them all. It was a great team effort, and it's great that she's free and back with her family.
Amen to that, Pete. And I know that you know the New York State penal law like the back of your hand. This is a state that we practice in. I practice as a detective, making these type of arrests and bringing them to the Queens District Attorney's Office. When we're looking at 135-25, which is kidnapping in a first degree, it's an A1 felony because it has a couple of components to it. There was a ransom note here, and he also held the victim more than 24 hours. Can you expand a little bit and just give our audience a little bit of education what this A1 felony means and how much time this perp is looking at?
Well, A1 felony is about as high a crime as there is. It's 25 to life. With respect to kidnapping in the first degree, we're talking about 3 subdivisions. 2 of them seem to apply. Third one would be if the victim did not survive the abduction. But kidnapping in the first degree is Penal Law 135-25, and I just happened to have it in front of me since I knew you were going to ask me that question.
You're a prepared attorney. I like it.
So a person is guilty of kidnapping in the first degree when he abducts another person and when, number 1, his intent is to compel a third party to pay or deliver money or property or as ransom, or to engage in other particular conduct, or to refrain from engaging in particular conduct. So that would seem to be right on the mark with respect to number 1. The police and the DA are probably going over the evidence and making sure they have every element of the crime. With respect to subdivision 2, a person is guilty of kidnapping in the first degree when he restrains the person abducted for a period of more than 12 hours with intent to A, inflict physical injury upon him or violate or abuse him sexually, and that's him or her, or accomplish or advance the commission of a felony, or terrorize him or a third person, or interfere with the performance of a governmental or political function. So here they're probably looking at what the what the intent of the abductor was, and probably going to charge him under that count too if they have sufficient evidence. Count number subdivision 3 applies if the victim does not survive. So we're really looking, as far as kidnapping in the first degree, the first 2 subdivisions.
So subdivision 1, as you just read, and 2. But we also, I apologize for going to the law offices other than yours. I should have used your law office. So accept my apologies. But I just wanted to. I wanted the audience to look at what you were talking about. So I thought it was decent enough for us to show a little bit on the screen there. Now, Pete, I want to ask you a couple of things. So as it pertains to these charges, a lot of people are not, I don't want to use the word outrage, but a lot of our listening audience are frustrated because they see this one charge. Now, I get it that everybody understands kidnapping in the first degree is a serious A1 felony. So when you look at the sentencing, could be, again, the minimum sentence would be, according to this writing that I'm looking here, the rest of your life in prison. You could spend, if you're convicted of class A1 felony, you could spend the rest of your life in prison. But the minimum sentence would be 15 to 40 years. I'm not sure a judge, especially a judge in Saratoga County, upon a guilty verdict and being convicted of this, would go with the minimum on this. This is a 9-year-old girl. Now, we do not know, Pete, if there's any type of sexual component to this. All of the reports are saying that she is okay. She's in good health, doesn't appear to be harmed. But as you and I know, investigators are not going to release information. This young girl had to be interviewed by special victims. And I want to, if you can talk a little bit about that, how that process goes and how long could that take before we see additional charges, Pete?
Well, let's talk about the time frame. Okay. Remember, there's been no grand jury indictment. There's been no presentation to the grand jury because they're still in an investigative stage. And while they're in investigative stage, they have a certain amount of leeway. Usually 144 hours, if my recollection is correct, prior to presenting the matter to the grand jury, and that could be extended for cause. So at this point, they are putting together the case, and even if they were to put together partial of the case, they could then supersede whatever indictment they got with a better and newer indictment. Right now, all they have to do is make sure they get a felony, and kidnapping in the first degree, subdivision 1 and probably subdivision 2 sound pretty viable at this point. So it's likely that they will get the felony in the grand jury very shortly, and then if other crimes are found, they will continue with the superseder, or they'll get the defendant to waive 180-80 so that they can take additional time.
And Pete, what is 180-80 for our audience?
All right, that's a state law that says you must present a case to the grand jury within a certain amount of time, or the defendant is released. The charges aren't dropped; he's just released. So that
pertains to New York State only, right?
That pertains to New York State only. There are other states that have similar provisions. There are other states that don't even have grand juries, that the prosecutor files an information and the person is tried on the information. But in New York State, you must obtain an indictment in order to try someone on a felony. You can waive indictment, and usually for waiver of indictment, that means that you're pleading guilty. You're not trying a case on a waiver of indictment. You're trying a case on an indictment that's presented to the grand jury. So those are, there's little intricacies there in New York law. Once you've been doing it for a while, it becomes a matter of hand. But at this point, they are running with the clock and doing as much as they can. And it would seem that there's search warrants being executed, and they're going to get the best case they have possible, so they can avoid, Charlotte having to try the case and having to testify. That's one of the goals here, is to have a solid enough case that trial is can be avoided.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be very sensitive to that, to the fact of sparing this 9-year-old. She's already been traumatized. We don't know what she went through in the course of Saturday night into Sunday, Sunday night into Monday.
Exactly.
He was collared on Monday at about 6:30 in the evening. So this poor girl was arguably with him for an extended period of time, almost 2 whole days. With this savage, and I think they're going to do everything in their powers to try to alleviate any more mental pain and anguish and torture for this girl. So I wanted to ask you, I want to switch gears just for a minute. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat. If you like this type of educational live stream as it comes and as it pertains from the criminal side, the criminal defense side, the criminal prosecution, the prosecutor side, Pete represents the best of both worlds. He's not only just a criminal defense attorney, he was on the other side prosecuting cases in Queens County. And I believe, was I right that you did federal and state, or did you just do state?
I was in Queens. I was in Suffolk County for a while. I was in Brooklyn. I was with the state attorney general's office. Some people say I can't hold a job, but I almost 40 years in prosecution in various very high levels. But I always kept the caseload because I felt that you had to show your people that you were willing to do the job that you were asking them to do.
I call it a jack of all trades, and I like that. I like a jack of all trades because you've seen every side of this. And this is, for us, is a great resource, because we can ask you things on another live stream of what I want to know about this eventually is, what is this guy's defense going to go with? How, we won't get into it here. I don't want to get people started, but for the chat, I want to say hello to everybody and thank you to the moderators and the replay viewers. If you like this, put a 1 in the chat. If you love this kind of stuff, if you love Pete, put hashtag Pete in the chat. I know he likes to be called Peter, but I like to call him Pete because we're like friends. So I call him Pete. I almost want to call him Uncle Pete, but then I'll make him feel older. So I'm not going to call him Uncle Pete. But yes, so a lot of 1s coming in the chat. It's going crazy right now. I want to play this little piece from News Nation to give us a break for a second, because this, we hear from the lieutenant colonel from the New York State Police. And Pete, you know that the state police, when you compare them to like the city guys like myself, and they're pretty tight-lipped about stuff like this.
I will tell you, I worked many years with the state police. There was a state police unit assigned to the Queens DA's office, and they are a top-notch operation. Look, we are lucky in New York that we have NYPD, we have state police, we have the Port Authority police, we have all the various other county police. We are blessed.
Yeah, 100%. These guys are top notch. And when they go to their academy, it's like a sleepaway. You go there and you're there for 6 months or 9 months in their camps upstate New York. I think it's outside of Albany. So their academy is, like with us, we would travel into the city and we did our police academy training day in and day out, traveling back and forth. You actually sleep in a barracks up there with the state police academy, and they're tightened up with with their ties always affixed and the trooper hats on. It's when you talk about a paramilitary, they're not even they're like military. So these guys are tight. So let's take a look at this, because I want the folks to see the lieutenant colonel. His name is Richard Allen, and that's another case from Delphi. That name, when I heard Richard Allen, I was like, whew. But this is Lieutenant Colonel Richard Allen.
We're learning more about the prime suspect in the kidnapping of a 9-year-old girl. Investigators believe Craig Ross Jr. abducted Charlotte Sena Saturday with the intent of getting money from her family. Charlotte went missing while riding her bike at a state park in upstate New York. Police able to pinpoint him as the suspect after finding his fingerprint on the ransom note. Correspondent Brooke Schaefer is live for us outside the Saratoga County Jail. So, Brooke, what else are you learning about this guy?
Well, Nicole, a New York State trooper told us that he believes this accused kidnapper is actually in isolation in this jail behind me. This afternoon, we're also learning some new information about that critical ransom note left for the little girl's parents. A lieutenant who helped rescue her speaking with News Nation's Chris Cuomo. Take a listen.
What was your feel for him? Do you think this guy was going to hurt this kid, or do you think this was a guy who was desperate for money and trying anything he could?
I think this is a guy that had a rough life and a lot of issues in his life. I think we're going to find this was probably a crime of opportunity. More so, he was in the right position at the right time, and for what reason he took her, we may never fully know that reason unless he tells us. I do believe as time went on, the chances of her being seriously injured or possibly killed by this individual would have gone up dramatically.
We have also learned that 47-year-old Craig Ross Jr. was interviewed briefly by detectives before he asked for a lawyer. Right now, investigators are still working to find out if there is.
Peter, I want to play the rest of this, but I want to stop it. I'm not going to put us back on, but our audio is being heard, obviously, by the audience. There's close to 1,600 and change in the live chat watching. Were you surprised that Lieutenant Colonel said what he said there, from maybe a criminal defense attorney side or even a prosecutor side? Do you think he said too much, or do you think he was good there?
Well, I think he's basing his opinion on what he knows at this point. And, he's a colonel, so he's pretty high up there, probably knows a great amount of information at this point. And what he sort of indicated there was that it was a crime of opportunity. It was a financially based crime, as opposed to a sexual assault type of crime. Obviously, both subdivisions are A1 felonies. So either one.
Do you feel that, as Shannon is saying here, he was being politically correct?
Oh, I don't know, but look, when I was a assistant DA, my general rule was say little and possibly say nothing, because facts change real quick as the investigation goes. Yeah. But I always found that the higher ups, needed to inform the public, and sometimes they said things that later on they regretted, but that goes with the territory.
I didn't feel he said much, but he definitely gave opinions, which I was surprised with. But he really didn't give much of information that's probably contained in the case file. I'm going to listen to this again because it's just another minute and a half. So let's take a peek at this. We'll replay this back. This is Chris Cuomo interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Richard Allen from New York State Police.
Think this guy was going to hurt this kid, or do you think this was a guy who was desperate for money and trying anything he could?
I think this is a guy that had a rough life and a lot of issues in his life. I think we're going to find this was probably a crime of opportunity. More so, he was in the right position at the right time, and for what reason he took her, we may never fully know that reason unless he tells us. I do believe as time went on, the chances of her being seriously injured or possibly killed by this individual would have gone up dramatically.
We have also learned that 47-year-old Craig Ross Jr. was interviewed briefly by detectives before he asked for a lawyer. Right now, investigators are still working to find out if there is any connection between him and this 9-year-old girl he is accused of kidnapping. Meantime, at the suspect's home, neighbors said 47-year-old Ross Jr. was quiet. He wouldn't acknowledge them if they waved at him. And they said that he actually moved out of this house over the summer because of health reasons. He moved into a trailer behind his mother's house, and that is where New York State Police found 9-year-old Charlotte Sena. She was reportedly hiding in a cabinet after a frantic 2-day search for her. Investigators tell us the accused kidnapper's mother was home when all of this happened. The house, again, right in front of the camper where police found that 4th grade girl. Detectives are right now interviewing the suspect's mom, trying to determine what she might have known about this kidnapping. Police say it's possible, but also still too early to tell if that mom will also be charged in this kidnapping. They do tell us, though, we should expect to see more charges against this 47-year-old man now sitting in jail.
Now, this is what we hear continuously, Pete. We're back on the screen. We hear that more charges are forthcoming. Let's just play devil's advocate here. If his mother knew that he was back there with this girl, holding her and holding her hostage, with this abduction, what charges would she be looking at, Pete?
No, she'd be looking at potentially the same charges, acting in concert, or hindering prosecution, or a whole number of charges. If they can find that she knew about it and she had the same intent to abduct the woman or to assist in the abduction of the woman, of the child, that would expose her to jeopardy. That would expose her to criminal liability. So at this point, they are probably looking to see whether he had any assistance, and they're also looking to see whether or not there was any other evidence that supports the crime or any other crimes, whether there's any stolen property, whether there's any drugs, whether there's any weapons. Those three things come quickly to mind. And that's what the search warrants are probably for. They're looking for also probably if they come across any further indication of potentially other victims. They are doing a very thorough job, I'll tell you now, to make sure that this isn't part of some serial situation.
Yeah.
And they certainly don't want to have their consciences all over themselves should this guy have been involved in other things in New York.
Yeah, they're going to be dotting their I's and crossing their T's and making sure that there's no other open cases where this method of operation is similar. So there's a lot of gumshoe work, as we used to say, right, Pete? The detectives are looking over those DD5s, and those are our New York City Police detectives files. Upstate, they probably call them just something different. Louise,
tracking his car to see, how many times he went on the throughway, how many times he went to New York City, how many times, he was clicked on one of the cameras, and see if there's anything that connects him to any other crimes.
Any cars that were at that residence or or any additional residents that were hit with search warrants and so forth, they're going to impound those vehicles and look to see if they can match it up, obviously, to the Moreau campground, lake campground, and see if he did in fact drive in there and snatch her. Her bicycle was found in a ravine, and I want to just first I want to stop this nastiness with the news misreporting stuff. His age is, according to my calculation, he's born March 17th, 1977. That makes him 46 years old, not 47. So, Louise, I know that you're hearing a bunch of different things. Again, 46, 47, the news is getting it wrong. His date of birth, according to the arraignment sheet that Pete and I looked at, is 3/17/77. Pete's doing its calculation right now. I know he's right. I'm right. 46, right?
I'm terrible at math.
Well, okay. So when this St. Patty's Day comes up, he'll be 47 in 2024. All right. Let's move on to what I was going to ask you about. So the bicycle was found, as per reports, in a ravine, but with the kickstand up. So it wasn't pushed over. They're going to look at the fingerprints. And Pete, I want to go to you on this because I know that you know this. I mean, I know it as well, but sometimes it's better when it's coming from someone who is a former prosecutor. In the state of New York, when we would make any arrest that was brought to central booking and processed, and even a desk appearance ticket, a DAT, we would do the online fingerprints that would in turn go up to Albany. And a lot of times we would have to wait for Albany to process those prints before we could take them to central booking and then bring our paperwork to the DA's office. Right. Can you explain that process in the state of New York and how they were able to come up with Craig Nelson Ross Jr.'s fingerprints that they took off the ransom note and may have taken off that bicycle, but they definitely took it off the ransom note? We know that for a fact. Could you explain that process of how it works in New York State?
Sure. I mean, what happens is underneath the law, when you're arrested, if it's for a crime, you get fingerprinted. Those fingerprints are sent to Division of Criminal Justice Services in Albany. They're also sent to the FBI for match for matching purposes, if you've had a prior arrest and you were fingerprinted, or if you've had any other type of like job requirement or whatever, and you were fingerprinted, there should be a match that comes up pretty quickly. What takes a lot of time is if you were never arrested before, and they have to go over the records, exceedingly carefully to make sure that this is your first arrest. And many times when I was involved in prosecutions, the mobsters got arraigned a lot quicker, because you can't be arraigned unless the fingerprints come back and they are, clear that what your record is. Whereas the mobsters would be arraigned and gotten through the system because they had prior arrests. Right. But somebody on a white collar crime arrested first time would be sitting in the holding cell indefinitely until the prints came back. And the families would be calling and saying, where is he? Why hasn't he been brought up? Why hasn't he been arraigned yet? And I would tell them, you can't be arraigned until the prints come back. And unfortunately, because he hasn't been arrested before, it's taking longer for it to come back. So,
right. Yeah.
That in a nutshell, without getting too scientific, is the situation.
So essentially, anybody and everyone in the state of New York, if you are arrested for a DWI, minor assault, any offense where you are handcuffed and fingerprinted and brought in, it goes into the New York State database. And this perpetrator had been arrested for a DWI in the past.
And apparently, it had not been sealed, so he was apparently convicted of something that required his fingerprints be kept on file.
And for those of you in the chat going crazy with this post office that he was a postal worker nonsense, nobody's confirmed that. Law enforcement didn't confirm it. And this is online rumors. Again, Jagaloonism 101. Don't listen to what you hear on the internet. This guy wasn't a postal worker as far as we're concerned, as far as we know. And anybody that's talking about it, it's just hogwash. Because if, in fact, he was a postal worker, I think that the press would have ran with that. And not because you're not hearing the press and the people in the media speaking about it, it's not something that's out there. His fingerprints were matched up because of exactly what we're saying here. He was arrested. It wasn't a sealed arrest. And they had they tried and they were unsuccessful. The first try to get the fingerprints off that ransom note, which coincidentally is being reported now that he had Charlotte write that note out. And the argument of people in the true crime community is like, how did he find their address? Was he stalking them? Listen, he had this girl for almost 2 days in his command in custody. He probably told her, tell me where you live or I'm going to kill you. Something to that effect. I'm not saying that's exactly what he said, but it doesn't take rocket science to figure that one out. He had her and he asked her, where do you live? And she probably blurted it right out. Like any 9-year-old would know exactly where they live for the most part. Yeah. So I want to play this little piece from Good Morning America because it also has Lieutenant Colonel Richard Allen talking again to the media, and he says a little bit more. Pete, you got enough time? We're at 30 minutes. You got another like 20 minutes to hang with us?
Absolutely.
I love you. Thank you, Pete. All right, here we go. Former New York Giant, Michael Strahan.
9-year-old girl who was abducted while camping with her family in upstate New York. Law enforcement sharing new details about the raid that saved Charlotte Sena. Stephanie Ramos has the story.
This morning, 9-year-old Charlotte Sena, who was abducted on a family camping trip in upstate New York, now back home with her family, as authorities reveal new details about the kidnapping and how she was rescued.
She was very emotional. I can't imagine what was going through a 9-year-old's head as all this is going on.
Police tracking down and charging 46-year-old Craig Ross Jr. with first-degree kidnapping. A ransom note left in the family's mailbox early Monday, the key to breaking the case. A fingerprint on it matched to Ross, who had been arrested for a DWI in 1999.
He was in the area, the opportunity presented itself, and he took advantage of that.
Investigators tracking down Ross and Charlotte in a camper on his mother's property in Ballston Spa, New York, Monday, about 22 miles away from where she was taken Saturday at Moreau Lake State Park. The fourth grader last seen riding her bike alone around a short loop on the campgrounds. That bike found minutes later. Authorities telling ABC News it was upright on its kickstand. SWAT teams descending on this rural property where they say they found Charlotte inside a small bedroom closet, the size of a cabinet, wearing an adult sweatshirt. Charlotte's family overjoyed she's home. Her aunt telling WGNA radio minutes before they got news of the rescue, Charlotte's mom was hopeful.
And she said, I don't know, mother's intuition. I just feel like she's coming home today.
Police tell us they are trying to give the little girl and her family some space as they also try and piece together a timeline of her disappearance. As for the suspect, his next court appearance is scheduled for October 17th. Michael.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. We are happy that she is home.
Amen to that. Amen. Pete, I wanted to ask you just, and I don't want to go far into this, but as far as the defense attorney, obviously we didn't hear that he got assigned any attorney, but if he was arraigned, they had to provide him with an attorney, correct?
Correct.
What do you see here? There's people in the chat also talking about his health. We don't have any confirmation. People are talking about that he has multiple sclerosis and that he's not a healthy guy. Does this have any? And I mean, I'm just putting this out there to you because you're the criminal defense attorney. Does this have any bearing on what charges and the severity of the charges he's facing at this time?
It may have a bearing on the defense. I mean, the first thing I do when I speak to a new client is try to get some understanding of their intelligence level and their awareness of what's going on and their understanding of the charges, because I want to make sure that they can provide meaningful assistance to me and meaningful assistance in their own defense. If they can't provide meaningful assistance in their own defense, then you have to start looking at, one of the mental defenses. But, that's a little bit far away at this point.
But does New York State have a mental health or a insanity? Can they use that in New York, Pete?
Well, let's talk about the basics. The basics is the prosecutor has to prove that the defendant intended to commit the crime. If he has a mental issue that would impair his intent to commit the crime, there may be a viable defense. I say may be a viable defense because it doesn't take a high level of mental acuity to meet the intent to commit a crime level. But obviously, if you're going to go to trial, all you need to do is convince one juror that this man was too sick to be thinking straight, and if you convince one juror, you've got a hung jury, and now we've got to try it again, and then the prosecutor has to consider, well, what do we do in order to discount that defense? So it's really not. We're not really talking about anything other than putting a doubt in the juror's mind that this person had the mental ability to have the intent to commit a crime. But that's far afield because we don't know anything about him right now. All we know is that he doesn't have a great hairdo in his mugshot picture, and from that we can't say he's crazy or anything similar to that. So at this point, there may be potential defenses, but we really don't know the viability of them, and I would just be speculating to say one defense is better than another or the like. I think we have to go a little bit farther down the road and see what the defense attorney can establish.
Amen to that. Pete, I want to show and thank you for going going there because I think that's an important part of the story, because those questions have to be coming up already with the true crime enthusiasts and the people who are following this case. So
you have to also remember a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. each and every element of the crime must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And the judge will say that 20 times during his charge to the jury at the end of the trial. So the prosecutor, before going down that road, has to make sure he can prove each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt.
100%. I'm going to put this full screen, and thank you for saying that. We say it all the time here. This is a man claiming to be Craig Ross Jr.'s son. He said his name was Joshua right here. I don't know, I can't make this bigger. I wish that I could. But he says that the family wants nothing to do with Craig Ross Jr. And he shouted he couldn't give a F if he dropped dead. That's what he said. And this is a picture of that camper. And I know it's small in the top right where my mouse is. It looks like major clutter, major confusion there. Here's crime scene. Ed Wallace would be very, very happy to see this. This is a detective in Tyvek with a camera, booties on, surgical gloves, and is taking, it looks like a big tote under the arm, big Tupperware tote, and a looks like we're going to ask Ed about this. That looks like crime scene evidence collection that she's holding on there and dragging out. We see this commonly at crime scenes. If we had Ed Wallace here with us, he would talk a little bit about it. Okay, here's a little bit better of a picture of this trailer where this poor 9-year-old Charlotte Sena spent 2 days and nights at this location, at least as far as we know. I mean, at this point, Pete, we don't know if she was where she was recovered, if she spent the whole time there. He might have moved her to different locations.
Sure.
As far as, yeah. So we can't just assume that she did spend all of the time here, but this is where she was recovered from by this savage. Let me just see if there's any other photos that I could share. This is the New York Post, by the way. Neighbors say 47-year-old, he's 46. Severely, here's where the multiple sclerosis comes in. Neighbors say 46-year-old, this 46-year-old severely suffered from multiple sclerosis and had recently moved back onto his mother's property in Ballston Spa about a month ago due to his condition. Again, the neighbors are saying it. I'd have to feel like, maybe it's true, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's neighbors just wanting to create a story. I don't know. We didn't hear anything from the corrections about that. But if in fact that's the case, it will probably eventually come out. Neighbors also say that Ross struggled to move around his property in Porter's Corner and had fallen behind on his payments. The Daily Mail reported he was often seen working in his year. Rarely spoke to anybody. Probably that meant in his yard. Rarely ever spoke to anybody in his neighborhood. That's about it. All right. So Pete, we're in the phase where he has a court date set up for well, he was arrested October 2nd, Monday, and his next court date is October 17th. He was arraigned on 135-25, and that's an A1 felony. How long do they have to upgrade these charges? Is there just an unlimited amount of time for the prosecution to come up with these charges? Are there time constraints on upgraded charges? Because they keep mentioning it.
Right. Well, it sounds as though since they've adjourned it to October 17th, he was arrested on October 2nd. That's already 2 weeks, so it's past the 180-80 day. So it sounds as though the defense attorney has waived 180-80. And probably there's going to be additional waivers by the defense attorney in order to learn as much as he can or she can about the case. So sometimes it doesn't pay to draw the line in the sand and say, I'm not going to waive 180-80 day, because then you force the prosecution to file a quick indictment, which they can probably get in this case anyway. And then they'll have to supersede it. And it's just some unnecessary work. that you're causing the prosecution, the police, which in the end, doesn't get you anywhere. So it sounds as though they waived it, and you'll find out on October 17th what the status is.
Can't wait for that October 17th court date to see. But can charges be upgraded in between that October 17th time?
Well, additional charges can be added.
Right.
I mean, I don't believe we have the complaint in front of us, right? Did you get
all it was is it was an arraignment sheet, so it didn't. I don't have access to it.
Okay, so
I'm sure that I could get access to it, but
usually the next day it would be published, or at least given to whatever usual sources they give it to, or you'd have to go to the courthouse yourself and pick it up.
Right. So yeah, that's the thing. Everyone's concerned about that because the New York State Police, the Lieutenant Colonel Richard Allen, keeps saying that charges are forthcoming, upgraded charges or additional charges.
Well, that makes sense. They're conducting search warrants. If they find something illegal that he had possession of, then they add those to charges. But they're also looking just for evidence supporting this crime. They're also looking to see whether or not he did anything else. Perhaps he was involved in other abductions.
Correct.
As we discussed before, they don't want to ignore that possibility.
Yeah, 100%. You got to look at it all. You have to look at all avenues here. So many people in the chat are saying already he's guilty. Obviously, Pete, we know innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof is on the state, prove their case, and they're going to have to do that in a court of law, unless he outright pleads guilty. And I don't think that he's going to do that upon getting counsel, and advice of counsel is they're always going to tell their client, what do you have to lose? So unless he says to them, yeah, I'm guilty. I don't want to fight this. And then, that's it. I want to play this little piece and then hashtag Pete, hashtag DutyRon, questions in the chat. So if you have questions, you can highlight them with super chats, or you can highlight them just with hashtag Pete, hashtag DutyRon. I want to say thank you to Melissa for becoming a member or being a member for 10 months. She says, love any and all coverage from this channel. Thank you, Melissa. Robbie, our good friend from Australia, sends in some coin. Good day, mate. He says, I'm going to print out his picture and send it out to law enforcement when they do the target practice. That's our Australian friend. He wants to make pictures of him for target practice. Cheryl, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Appreciate it. Welcome to the DutyRon family. Charlene, thank you for the super love. Enjoy your show enormously. New member, and I'm happy I found you. Well, guess what? Pete and I are happy you found us. So thank you for being here. Rianne the Diva sends in a $5 super chat, and she says, I have to go through MS myself, but I'd only abduct my handsome neighbor.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that you're going through that, but go easy on your handsome neighbor. Take it easy with him. All right, let's play this piece, Pete. This is the last one, and then we'll take the audience's questions. This is another piece from Good Morning America.
Vanished while riding her bike in upstate New York. Authorities say she is in good condition, and this morning we are learning new details on how they say they tracked down the suspect and brought her home. Let's go to Stephanie Ramos, who's in upstate New York for us. Good morning, Stephanie.
Robin, good morning. As each hour went on in this search, hope faded. Agencies like the New York State Police to the FBI all assisting in this massive search for Charlotte. And when she was found, there was this collective sigh of relief. Police are now trying to figure out if Charlotte's family was deliberately targeted.
Relief and joy this morning. Missing 9-year-old Charlotte Sena found alive after a heart-pounding 48-hour search.
She'll be going home. That's the story. Charlotte will be going home.
Family and friends gathered at a vigil in upstate New York overnight, erupting in cheers the moment they got the news. Charlotte's family overcome, thanking the hundreds of rescuers who jumped into action after she disappeared at Moreau Lake State Park on Saturday while biking with friends. Police believing she was abducted. On Monday, New York State Police confirming Charlotte was found in good health and a suspect was taken into custody after leaving a ransom note at the Sena family home.
State police immediately go to the mailbox and identify what is a ransom note that had been left behind for Charlotte. 4:20 in the morning, opens the mailbox and inserts the ransom note, leaving a critical piece of evidence behind, his own fingerprint.
The suspect, identified as 47-year-old Craig Nelson Ross Jr.,
46.
he's been charged with kidnapping in the first degree. New York Governor Kathy Hochul saying overnight they found him and Charlotte in a camper behind his mother's home 13 miles from the Sena's house. Charlotte found in a cabinet.
The little girl was found in a cabinet, cupboard. She was rescued.
Charlotte taken to a local hospital. Governor Hochul saying she appeared to be outwardly physically unharmed. Charlotte had last been seen at 6:15 Saturday evening at the state park where she was camping with her family, riding bikes with friends around this loop when she decided to go around it one last time by herself before sunset. When the fourth grader didn't return after 15 minutes, her parents started searching. At 6:45, her bike was found along the path, but Charlotte was gone.
You can never be too careful with your kids. You know, pay attention to where they're at, what they're doing. For her to ride her bike around that loop would take her about 4 minutes, 5 minutes. You think they're safe doing that at 9 years old, but you just got to be cognizant and be paying attention to things around you, your surroundings all the time.
Police say a fingerprint on the ransom note was matched to fingerprints from the suspect's arrest in this area in 1999 for driving while intoxicated. The governor says
How damning is that in the case, Pete, from an attorney's perspective?
That's quite damning. Absolutely. Unless he could find some other reason why his fingerprint would show up there, it's hard to get around.
And I got a strong feeling that his fingerprint's going to be found on that bicycle. They're not talking about that bike because if they have that, that's another slam dunk. And I think that we're going to hear more about that in the near future. Let's let the rest of this play because it's almost over.
Charges are expected in overnight. Charlotte's family releasing a statement saying they are so thankful and thrilled to have Charlotte home. They do understand this is not the outcome for everyone, but they are thankful.
So, Pete, a lot of questions coming in the chat. And for those of you in the chat, if you want a chance at a free membership, put a number 2 in the chat. Make sure you're subscribed and make sure you give this video a thumbs up right now. Everyone that wants a chance to get that free membership, I'm going to gift out 10 memberships. As long as my credit card goes through, Pete, I'm going to give out 3 memberships to 10 lucky viewers. You have to give the video a thumbs up. You have to be subscribed to this YouTube channel, and I'm going to do it in a couple of seconds. Pete, fingerprints, they don't lie, right? They're saying
to get around.
They're saying it's confirmed that some Channel 13 News, which is local up there, confirmed that he's a letter carrier. What would make that's not going to make any difference in this case, since he used the mailbox to put that ransom letter in. Someone put in the chat, would that make it a federal crime? I don't think so. What do you think, Pete?
I don't. If it is a federal crime, it's not at the grade level that we're talking about in the state. I believe that. I can't even think about what high level crime it would be. He didn't cross state lines. Everything was local.
Right.
So, I think New York State has the highest level crime right now.
Yeah. So, in other words, what Pete just said is, even if there was some type of federal charge, and I'm not saying there is, it wouldn't outdo the 135-25, right? The kidnapping. It's an A1 felony, punishable of life in prison. With that one charge, upon conviction, the judge will have the opportunity to sentence to him to life in prison. So, all right, I'm going to do it now. I wish I had the drum roll. Ed Wallace usually does the drum roll, but here goes 10 free memberships. Everybody make sure you put a number 2, subscribe, thumbs up. There was another question in the chat. Let's go back, Pete, because we're close. We're close to being. We're almost at the end. Do you have anything to add to this that would help further keep this audience engaged in this or understanding this process that we're looking at here? Anything? I mean, I know you covered almost everything, but anything?
Well, I would just say that the public has the right to know, but just be advised that at some point, you are potentially tainting the jury pool, because you have to remember, you have to assure that he can get a fair trial. And if everything is out there and it's repeated many times, it's going to be difficult to get a panel of jurors who haven't made up their mind regarding the facts. So that's obviously the public has the right to know, but it has to be balanced with the defendant's right to a fair trial. And once the governor starts coming out making statements, and the heads of police departments and the like, find the date of the arrest. But if it continues, you're looking at impacting the jury pool.
Right. And you definitely don't want that in a small, upstate location, Saratoga County. I'm sure it's not densely populated like we have over here. Right. Here's one of our chatters saying mailboxes are federal crimes. But again, yes, it may be a federal crime, but it will not supersede the A1 felony of kidnapping in the first degree. Kidnapping in the first degree would outweigh any federal mailbox crime. And I don't think, I think if there was federal charges to be dropped here, they would have looked into it, or we would have heard about it. I don't see that coming. So don't put all your eggs in that basket. If you're really counting on those federal charges, Pete, how much would you put your pension in that?
No, in fact, it's interesting that the caller said that, because the caller is to a certain extent right, that U.S. mail is sacrosanct, and anything dealing with the tampering with the mails is a federal crime. However, once that letter gets delivered to your mailbox, it's now no longer in the U.S. postal system, and now it's a local matter. So if you want to, because I used to have many a fight with federal agents over whether or not they had jurisdiction, or we in the state had jurisdiction. And as long as the mail had not left the letter carrier's bag, it was still under the auspices of the federal government.
Then there you go.
It's like it's like Santa Claus. Once it leaves his bag, it's yours. It's not under the purview of Santa Claus anymore.
Once it's delivered into your mailbox, it's now no longer federal property.
Correct.
So somebody in the chat was saying, because the chat's moving crazy here, it's Mermaid says, DutyRon, why did officers put up drones today? Why today? What are they looking for? Well, as I say, with all investigations, when you start doing investigations and you interview people, it opens up doors that leads to different areas. And I'm not saying that this is exactly the case here, but they may have found out through interview and interrogation. Now, Pete, you can stop me at any time. We know that this perpetrator, Craig Ross Jr., invoked his Fifth Amendment. He said, I don't want to speak anymore. I want an attorney. Once that starts, once he says that, then your interview and interrogation ceases. You cannot question him anymore. Correct, Pete?
Correct.
But if there is interviews of witnesses, the mother, anybody on that property, anybody that was at the campground, that can indicate to investigators that items were discarded, or if her clothing, she was found in a sweatshirt, an adult sweatshirt. If her clothing was removed and they did not recover that, maybe they were looking in the park or wherever they put those drones up for perhaps some of her personal items, her clothing.
Correct.
Pete, am I going in wrong areas here? I don't think so.
Absolutely. Look, they remember the police have to eliminate all of his potential defenses that they can think of. I mean, at some point he might say he was the agent for somebody. He was just sent to drop something off, and he didn't know anything about anything. You know,
Right.
I mean, that's a defense that jumps out sometimes in abduction cases. So,
100%.
so the police have to backtrack and make sure that they have sufficient evidence. You don't know whether Charlotte's going to be able to testify. Obviously, the fingerprint is damning evidence, but you know, there's always the defense that I was given $25 to deliver this.
Yeah,
And
right. Yeah,
so-
he called me up to help, or he did.
Correct.
Listen, Live and Love says, DutyRon, you think there's a possibility there was another person helping him because he has MS? If there is, it's up to the investigators to be able to prove that there was in fact someone helping him. You can't just point the finger and say, somebody was helping you. We know it. Let's drag him in. They need concrete evidence. They need hard evidence. They need a lot of things to be put in place, Pete, before you can now drag somebody in and say you're an accessory to this crime, including his mother. And that's why we don't see any charges on her yet. But again, when you hear words of this is still an ongoing investigation, Pete, we've heard that many, many a time, and you've been on the other end of that as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office. The wheels of justice are spinning right now, right? So things are happening. Search warrants are being obtained. Additional search warrants could be being obtained for digital and forensic evidence. But those drones being up and searching is not abnormal. It's not cause to be concerned. That is what they're supposed to be doing, to have a thorough, full investigation, no stone unturned, you hear, right? You know, there's lots of cliches we throw out, Pete, but for no stone to be unturned, it takes a lot of work. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And Miriam says October 17th will be upon us quick. Yeah. Before you know it, we'll be at that next hearing. 2,000 people here in the chat, Pete, taking a peek at what we're talking about. More questions coming in the chat. I know that, listen, if we don't get to your questions, leave them in the comments section down below. And I'm going to ask you guys, if you're not yet subscribed to Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and LinkedIn. All one word, DutyRon. As a matter of fact, Pete and I are friends on LinkedIn. And are you on any other social, or is that where you are exclusively, LinkedIn?
Yes.
Right. So I have Pete's information in the description. If you have any questions, you could send him. I'm sure he would love to open up his LinkedIn and see 1,000 messages from all of you guys. Only kidding. He's got a busy law practice that he's running. If you have any questions, just send them into dutyron.com and put #Pete, and I'll ask those questions for you to him. I think we cleared a lot of the questions in the chat. His son and daughter were there briefly. He's got children. His son arguably made that statement to the Post reporters. I hope he rots in jail. Maybe the son, doesn't get along with the dad. I would assume here to make those kind of statements. He doesn't sound like he's the greatest guy. But again, we need to wait and see what the evidence is and see what they got. And this will be an interesting trial if it does ever kick off. There's a lot of things that are going to take place. And Pete, before we get to a trial, we could be looking at some time in 2024, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. This stuff doesn't happen quick.
Quite a ways away.
Yeah. Yeah. So Miranda Lee says, yeah, his son is disgusted in what he allegedly did. I think that there's credence in that. Who would be behind that? Who would be a cheerleader for Craig Nelson Ross Jr.? Now, we all know that there's cheerleaders from murderers like Chris Watts. He's getting letters in prison from women. You got all these heinous criminals who have a fan club. So don't be surprised. I mean, there's going to be, you'll hear people that'll come out and say, oh, you guys are convicted him before he even gets a chance to get in the courtroom. And you know what? If you ask me, Pete, this is a tough go. This is a tough one to get behind. And I wouldn't want to be the defense attorney representing this guy. Because
no, it's a tough one, but that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Pete, I wanted to go to you for final words on this case.
I think that it's a good example of police cooperation and great investigative work, and I commend them. And I'm so happy that she has, Charlotte has returned to her family. God bless them. God bless our first responders.
Amen. And we had the summer of the summer of love in 2020 when Seattle and Portland and all the major cities were burning right after George Floyd, and people were talking about defunding the police. And this is a classic example of you cannot defund the police. You should refund them, give them as much support as you can. The state police did a fantastic job. The good men and women who put their lives on the line day in and day out. I mean, this is not the norm that we get a result like this, but you have to celebrate these. I want to end this video by saying that the Sena family, mom and dad, the dad and mother are taking time off from their jobs to obviously nurse their daughter back, her mental health, her physical health, her trauma. She's traumatized. So mom and dad just put everything aside. The dad took a leave of absence from his job, and mom is also home. So they started a GoFundMe. I have it linked in the description. We made a donation on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon. That's all of you. I'm going to go full screen with this. Every one of you who make contributions through Super Chats, through Patreon, through cups of coffee, through any type of PayPal stuff that you guys sent to me. We made a donation on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon in this community of $500. I did it yesterday to the Sena family GoFundMe. It's to help them get through this troubled time. I think it's a good thing. And if you have a spare $1 or $5 or anything, send it to them in this GoFundMe. I have it linked here in the description. Her aunt started it, so it's under her aunt's name, but the $500 that we sent is on behalf of you guys, all of you here who support this community. So I told the family when I made that donation that it was not coming from me, myself, even though it came on the GoFundMe with my name, Ron Liccardi, because that's just what my PayPal is connected to. But I told them that that donation came from all of us here at the Crime Time. So if you're subscribed, you're a member, you're a supporter, you made a donation to them. But if you can afford to give just a little bit more over and above what I gave on behalf of all of us, go over there and do it. And it's linked in the description. Pete, I want to thank you for your friendship, your time, your expertise, and you explain things in such a great way in layman's terms where everyone understands it. Once in a while you say 180, I got to stop you, but you
thank you. You have a great show, and I enjoy spending some time with you and your listeners.
Yeah, this is great. They all look forward to your perspective from the law side and from an attorney's side. So you bring like I said, you bring the best of both worlds. You were on the side of a prosecutor, going after and charging people, and now you're on the defense side. So awesome. We love and respect you, and thank you for taking out time.
Well, let me just say once again, thank you for your service, Ron. And you're continuing to do good for the people by educating them and explaining to them, situations that are quite ghastly at times. So thank you.
Yeah. And I want to also say thank you to the replay viewers, the people who leave super thanks in the comments while watching the replay. That's a way to leave a donation for Pete, Ed, and anybody who's a guest that comes on. You guys are phenomenal when you do that, and just leaving comments, and it's a way to continue the conversation. So I want to just send strength, prayers, and positive vibes to the Sena family in Charlotte's recovery. Anything and anything that we can do here on our show. I'm going to ask Charlotte's aunt to come back, and I'm also going to extend that olive branch to her parents down the line, down the road. 2 weeks from now, a month from now, whenever, if they want to come on and they just want to give some words, I'll offer them an opportunity. But I know Janae is wanting to come on to talk and give thanks and say thank you to everybody. So we may be hearing from her aunt again sometime soon. So look for that. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace and love from Pete, Attorney Pete Carusco, and DutyRon. Thanks, guys, for joining.
Bye-bye.
Good night.